Greetings, Springfield. I feel like we should be doing a Guitar Hero session down here, so if anyone would like to change the session, we can do that. Hopefully everyone's here to learn a bit about moving applications to the Azure cloud. My name is Mike Puckridge. I'm a solution specialist with a company called Intellidox, and Chris Gabriel is our lead solution architect, and Chris will be showing us a lot of hands-on pieces about moving a traditional enterprise app into the Azure cloud. We're going to spend a fair bit of time looking at some of the problems we encountered along the way so that we can help you understand how to avoid some of the pitfalls that come along. Generally, it was a fairly good process for us. As a development company, it took about a week's worth of development to get up and running in our initial stage. So we'll share with you those steps. We're going to give a little bit of a demonstration of the product so that you can see the initial enterprise app before clouding it. That's Chris's official term.
Thanks.
And then we're going to step through why this was just another logical piece of evolution for our roadmap and development. Then we'll get into the guts of how we actually got there. So we'll be showing how we moved to SQL Azure, how we moved to the rest of the platform, and then after that, look at what are the future steps that we know we want to do next, and what are the logical progressions there. And we have some prizes as well. So we have the PowerMonkey Explorer that we're going to give away. If you stick around to the end of the session, now I know that's going to be hard for people that want to get to the go-karts. Is anyone else torn here? I'm actually quite torn for tonight's session. Drinking go-karting. Yeah, we've got more here. Sorry? I think
right, yeah.
everyone's going to be lining up at the start there. That's the big problem, I think. But if you stick around, we'll be handing out a URL that actually gets you using our product and to register, very quick and easy registration form. This is a solar charger for all sorts of devices, USB, mini USB, and a bunch of other things. I can testify it's really good. I just got back from Tanzania. I used one of these so I could read my Kindle on the side of Mount Kilimanjaro. So it does work and is a good product. All right, so what is our core software that we develop? We're a document process automation tool, and we have a focus on also smart web forms for gathering information. There are three parts of our solution. There's the collection of data where we draw from existing or legacy data stores. We have a rules engine and a drag and drop interface for building those rules that transforms that data, and then we communicate that information out, and traditionally we've done that with Word documents, PDFs, XML feeds, and can connect back to things like CRM and other database systems. As a development house, we've very much been, in the 20 years we've been around as a company, a Microsoft development shop, and very focused today on .NET development. And the platforms that we typically use for our enterprise solution is an SQL database under the hood, and the main components are running on IIS. So we'll cover that and show those shortly. A couple of other people want to recognise here today too. Kunal and Bruce. Kunal is one of our senior developers, and Bruce, our CTO. They've had a big part in cloudifying our solution. And also to Rocky Heckman here from Microsoft, who has been our technical resource for understanding how to move to the platform. Okay, moving to Chris. Chris, I love the colours. I think we do look like two very large packets of Dairy Milk chocolate, but...
Or maybe Teletubbies when we're wearing those big badges in the...
Oh yeah, I'll hand that to you, Chris.
Thanks, Mike. Okay, so we're here to talk about our transition to the cloud. So it's kind of our story of how we moved over. And obviously you've probably already seen a lot of sessions about the cloud, probably almost getting as sick of hearing the term cloud as I am. But there's a lot of good stuff for customers, and obviously people want to lower their costs, and they don't want to have to manage the infrastructure of IT, and they want to make sure they can access their data and their apps from everywhere they are in the world. So for customers, the story has been told over and over, and for us as an ISV, Intellidox is looking to obviously help lower the cost for customers and for ourselves, and be able to focus on our product rather than on the deployment, and every time we deploy having to address that question, will it work in this environment today?
Also helps our QA department in not having to set up testing hardware and software that we can automatically deploy for them to run through their
That's right.
test patterns.
One platform that always works the same, so you can support the full lifecycle management. And of course, supporting the hybrid models of data security and sovereignty to be able to connect through to people's local data stores that they keep their protected data close to them, while still being able to access their applications everywhere. Okay, so I wanted to share with you a little bit of our evolution over the years. So the product, as Michael said, we've been around as a company for around 20 years, but the product really came into the world around the same time Microsoft brought out their first Xbox. And so we're playing that, but also building Intellidox, and it started its life as a traditional client-server model.
The evolution would have been a bit quicker if you weren't playing so much Xbox.
Probably. And you can see over the span, obviously we started on the old technology of the time. In fact, the first version was actually running on Oracle database before we moved it across to SQL Server and moved it onto the .NET platform. It became a web-based application that gave us more options for deploying and reaching more customers. And then more and more customers wanted to have access to different ways of purchasing the application, so we actually played around with the software as a service type of space as well.
Yeah, so we have customers like AXA who use us to produce their financial advice, and all their advisors have access to us on a managed service.
Okay, and bringing us into today, obviously what we're here to talk about is our transition across to Azure, and we're going to show you some demos in a minute of how we transition the product. And there's a lot of opportunity here for us, and a lot of new things in Azure for us to yet connect to and play with. Azure Connect is something that we're looking at the moment. As well as all the cool stuff we've been seeing around here, talked about Office 365 and SQL Denali and all those things as well.
So the Azure Connect allows our customers to connect to their data sources inside their organisation to value add the communications that we build?
Yeah, that's right. And also SharePoint is a big area for us, being a document-centric process. So SharePoint, we already offer connected to SharePoint directly. Yeah, the SharePoint Online stuff is a space for us to move into next. So we know why we wanted to move to the cloud. We started this journey without any real knowledge of what Azure is in particular, and how we were going to go about transitioning our product. So
we knew it was a cloud.
We knew it was a cloud. We knew it was there. We wanted to get there, but we needed to figure out how. So we called our good friend Rocky and promised we'd embarrass him with the sound didn't work, our little, hey Rocky, watch me pull a rabbit out of my hat. It was either going to be that, or it was going to be the whole, Sylvester Stallone. Yeah.
Somebody had to do it.
That's
right. Sorry, Rocky.
Okay, so Rocky came in. We actually, a couple of us attended Rocky's roadshow about Azure architecture and development, which was really useful. A couple of great things we got from there, apart from the good food, it really gave us a map of what Azure is and what we're actually getting ourselves into. And then Rocky actually came in to our office and had a look at our product, our current architecture, and helped us actually map out where we were taking that to Azure. So we pretty much started the journey, finding out, looking at the options, and then it was time to roll up our sleeves and get the job done.
Can we just get a raise of hands to see who's actually attempted to build an app or host it on Azure? Okay, so there's one. Anyone in their plans are working in that direction? So some more hands around the room. So hopefully we'll help you get there quicker, I think.
Very cool. What I'd like to do before we jump into our whole Azure piece is actually give you a bit of background on the product itself. So I'm going to jump over and do a demo of IntelliDocs pre-Azure.
Button here.
We get the right button.
Beautiful.
Okay. All right. So I've got my sound going crazy. Okay. So I've got my Sorry? All right, we might have to switch to that if it keeps going, but we'll see how we go. Okay, so what I'm going to show you, IntelliDocs before it moved to Azure, this is just running on on our standard sort of hosted sort of server back at the office. This is IntelliDocs Producer, which is the front-end user interface for going in and generating documents. I mean, Michael mentioned right at the start, we're about document creation, and our product primarily focuses on data input, transforming that data and generating documents.
If we were to look at something like the AXA one, it's, you can imagine providing financial advice. They ask hundreds of questions about your current financial situation and what kind of strategy you're wanting. The one we built for them has something like 8,000 decision points in it and produces a very detailed, very personalised 50 to 80 page financial plan for you. And the tool in doing that is very flexible in terms of the end users having the business line owners having the ability to build the logic, and we find that with most of our deployments.
What I'd like to show you, actually touching on the logic of a form, is just a simple form we've actually built as an example of a government form. And a lot of you probably filled out recently the census forms. Maybe you did it online. A lot of government forms are traditionally pretty bad to fill in. They usually don't lead you dynamically through the questions that are only relevant. You're asked a whole plethora of things and you have to skip to section 2 and then skip to question 16 and so forth. With IntelliDocs, it's all about leading you down a guided path.
Is there anyone here from the ABS? Okay, if there was, one of the things, who filled in their census form online? Good, a good lot of geeks in the room, excellent. Who filled it in paper-based?
No.
Sad, Kunal, sad, sad. Did your mum fill it in for you? Okay. So I don't know if you remember filling that out, but one of the things that I found a little bit frustrating filling that out is once I'd answered something, did I, have kids, or, did I do something and said no, it still left the questions for that set of answers if you had answered yes. I mean, it blacked them out, but they were still there. With a product like this, we just get rid of those. So you just see what applies to you.
Yeah, and just on screen we've got a demo of exactly that. So if I select this option, it's going to give me this drop-down list. So that leads you through that guided sort of process. So rather than watch me type in all these answers, I'll just I'll load up an answer file which has all some answers we previously entered. And I can flip through next, and you can see it's really a wizard-style approach. You can see there's a variety of different types of questions and different layouts that you can use. These tab pages of questions, you can set up quite a dynamic and rich web form.
And if you take away the bottom ticked one there,
Bracky, yeah.
Whatever, it removes it if you're not adding those pieces in.
Okay, so when you get through and generate the document and sign on behalf of Michael, Generate. Okay, so it's going away and generating that. It's pulling in all the answers you plugged in, plus content from the content library. And we can open that. It's generated a Word document this time. And what we did for the demo was just put together what the actual paper-based form that we based this on looked like. And you see there's a whole bunch of blank answers here where we didn't have to actually address them in the wizard, and where we have actually answered questions, we've got the various answers and options ticked. Okay, so that's essentially, part of our product. That's the front end part. We've got Director as well, which is the administration tool, and Designer, which is where you go in and design the templates and forms and questions and logic. So I'll show you a bit more of that later when we've got this onto Azure. So this is the product we moved. Okay, and we switch.
If anyone's tweeting from this session, if they could tweet that we're giving away cars in this session, we'll bring in a few more people.
Okay, so what we just saw there was Producer, and you can see in the architecture I've got up a very simplified look at our architecture. We've got the browser applications there, Producer and Director, and they're obviously running from an IIS web server, which also delivers via click once Designer to the desktop. So Designer application is a Windows Forms application running on the local machine. And behind all of that, there's SQL Server database. So we had our architecture, and we thought the best approach for us was to try and migrate our core architecture across to Azure before we worried about anything else that connects in and any other pieces to complicate the matter. So we took a look at Azure's architecture, and we've got a very simplified form of that again on the screen here, and just want to focus on these couple of areas. So obviously you've probably seen these sort of diagrams already before, the compute space where you've got the different roles that actually run code, and that might be a web role, a VM role, or a worker role, thank you, which we actually didn't want to focus on too much just yet, so we started off with the web role. In terms of storage, of course, SQL Azure, where we've got the relational data, and a few other areas there. So if we start mapping on the pieces of IntelliDocs, obviously the web role relates directly to our web applications, and we just decided that Designer should just work. We'll get to that later. SQL Azure is obviously where we want to put our database. We do have a lot of plans around actually improving the performance, because there's a lot of benefits we can gain from tapping into Windows Azure storage using the blobs and table storage there, which gives us some good performance measures we can improve on. But that's a story we're yet to tell. We've got
and Azure Connect for getting into the customer side databases and data storage.
That's right. So yeah, Azure Connect, their App Fabric, and the content delivery network as well has got some obvious benefits that we can tap into as well. So this approach we decided on was to take some baby steps, and I'll just take you through the sort of process, the thought process that we went through, and our lovely baby feet up there.
The disturbing thing, these are actually Canal's legs down here. That for a grown man to have legs like that is just disturbing.
Definitely. Okay, so obviously we started by setting up the Azure SDK so that we could get going on it, and I won't bore you by actually doing that in front of you, but we then decided we'd actually transform our database, migrate our database to SQL Azure. So database was the second piece. And then rather than actually trying to tackle the whole of IntelliDocs across, we thought we'd start with a mini version, a Hello World app that we migrated first. I'm a big fan of Hello World apps. And then migrated more of IntelliDocs as we went through. Okay, So I'm going to show you a demo in a sec of SQL Azure, but just to take you through the steps that we went through to migrate that. Obviously, once we had an Azure account and subscription, we created a database. And in the blank database, we needed to bring a script in. So we went to good old SQL Server 2008 R2, which is really important because it gives you these advanced scripting options and allowed us to set the engine type to SQL Azure database for our scripting out of the IntelliDocs database. So we generated the scripts, good old copy and paste. We script the script into SQL Azure, hit the execute and hope for the best. And there were a few issues along the way. One of them was the fact that tables must have clustered indexes in Azure for them to work. And I'll get into that in the demo in a second. Then, so we went through this process of we executed it, fixed a few issues and repeated that. And importantly, we found that for testing, it was really useful that we could just connect our local instance of IntelliDocs using a connection string straight into the SQL Azure database. Okay. All right, so I'm going to start off just having a look at the Azure management portal. And when you start up, to get into SQL Azure, just go to database, of course. And here you need to create a new subscription, create a new server. So we did that, and then create a new database. And I'll just have a look quickly at those steps. It's very straightforward wizard that takes you through it. You can create a new server or use an existing one. You can do it in one step or two steps if you click on create a database straight away and give it a name and so forth. It's very simple, but I've already built one, and I'll just take you through my subscription here. So IntelliDocs Azure, this is the server we provisioned, and you can set up firewall rules so that you can limit the IP addresses from different endpoints. So obviously, if you're working at it at the office, you've got to have the IP range available to access that data. Okay, so inside there, I've got, apart from the master database that you always get, I've got the IntelliDocs database itself. I've chosen a maximum for that for 1 gigabyte, which I'm not even close to at the moment. And for today, I thought we'd just, I wanted to quickly show you some of that clustered indexing stuff in a demo database. So I've got a blank database here. I'm going to go ahead and click on Manage, and this gives us the management window that's akin to using the local SQL Server Management Studio.
And that server name, it's a very nice Welsh town.
That's right. Okay, and once you log in, which is cool and quick in this network, I was tethered to my phone practicing this before, and it was a bit slower. Okay, so it gives you this really cool cube that kind of spins around and shows you a bit of basic information. Just
very easily used, Chris.
Very easily. Okay, so I've got a couple of queries that I've prepared for today, and I just want to show you what happens. I'll just open them both up. Yep. Okay, so what happens when we create a table? And one of the things we found, because our database has been through many years of migrations from versions of SQL Server and so on, we had a lot of tables that came out with just a simple create table statement when we scripted them, just like the one I've got up on screen there. And when you actually execute that in Azure and click on there to get the message, it actually tells you it completed successfully, and it actually did. It created the table. But when I go to insert any data into that table, it's then that it actually tells you that you must have clustered index. So tables without clustered index are not supported. When you're generating a script that's thousands and thousands of lines and many, many tables and so on, obviously that's an important thing to try and look for up front, is any of these sort of little issues. So if I just quickly drop that, and I'll just run this whole script here, drop that and recreate that with a clustered primary key. and then try and run the insert, which I just did the whole lot there, we can see one row affected, so we know we're pretty good. And testing my amazing SQL writing skills.
And Kunal, did you pass your SQL test there?
Okay, and we can see, yep, there's our row of data. So you can see we've got ourselves a pretty decent Silverlight-based application to work with in here, and yeah, importantly, you've got to work with some of the constraints of SQL Azure. Okay, we've just done that bit. All right, so some overall tips for SQL Azure. Check the limitations up front and fix your application. For us, some of those clustered index were an issue, but there are a few other things. Most of the restrictions in SQL Azure are due to making sure it performs well and making sure that it's secure, so it can't actually fiddle with the operating system underlying. So a lot of the system store procedures are disabled. Full text search indexing is not supported for performance reasons, I'm guessing at this stage. And I've put up a URL there that's got some handy guidelines and a list of limitations in there. There's actually heaps of information on MSDN, specifically going around listing which system store procedures are or are not available and so forth.
If you download the slide deck, we've got a whole bunch of resources at the end of the slide deck that will help avoid some of the things we ran into.
And finally, I mentioned earlier, using SQL Server Management Studio, you can actually connect up directly to your SQL database and a SQL Azure database, and that's really handy because you get all the syntax highlighting and everything. I mean, you get a pretty cool interface with within the management panel there, but if you're doing a big script, I'd definitely recommend using your local Management Studio. Okay, so I want to go ahead and actually show you, referring back to our baby steps. Once we kind of got our database over, we then went on to actually building a Hello World application. And what I've done is put together in Visual Studio here a Hello TechEd application. This is a pre-Azure application, so this has not yet been migrated to Azure. And what I'm going to do is show you the steps that we took to actually migrate this application. Okay, once that loads up, you can see it's a single web application project in there, and it actually only displays a single page, a default page, and it connects to my Azure database and grabs some information. I'll just run it locally and show you what it does look like. Okay. Starting the development server. We know we're close. Okay. What it's actually doing, I think, is timing out. Yep, it's timing out on trying to fetch the data. So this is our sort of our little banner. It doesn't do too much but say hello, but it does go and try and look up how many times our pre-event form has been run. So
run on Azure.
Run on Azure, yeah. We're getting a question mark because it's not actually populating that, and the reason for that is because we didn't add our IP address back on our server. So obviously I've connected up to the network here, and it's different. So if I go to firewall rules and add a rule name, the cool thing is it tells you exactly what your IP address is, so you don't need to, Control C, don't need to look it up. So okay, so now I've added that in, we should be able to just hit F5 in theory, and we can see it's been run 24 times. Whew. Okay. All right, so now we've seen what it looks like locally, and I'll actually close that because we're running in debug mode. What I want to do is actually go and create a new hosted service in Azure. So I go into the management portal, go to my hosted services, and you'll see that I've actually already got my subscription set up. An important thing to note here is in order to deploy, you have to have a certificate on your local machine that you actually register in with the Azure platform. So you add the certificate in here first. And when you add the certificate, you browse to a file. Now, I'll get to that in a second because you can actually create that straight out of Visual Studio the first time you go through. So I'll show you that in a minute. And I want to create a hosted service in here ready to accept a new application. You can see I've got a few already. Let's have a look at them. I've got a trial version of my Hello TechEd application that's actually running in staging. And we've got a dev area for our IntelliDocs deployment, as well as the IntelliDocs TechEd deployment, so the deployment we did for TechEd. We're going to go ahead and create a new hosted service. We'll give it a name, and we call this one IX Hello TechEd, and we'll give it a URL prefix. Importantly, if you're doing a staged deployment to a stage environment, it actually gives you this crazy GUID-like number at the start of your URL instead of the actual name you enter here. But when you do a production deployment, it gives you the full predictable URL.
We'll talk about that a bit later as an issue that we needed to avoid a little bit.
Yeah. Okay, so Southeast Asia is our closest region, so we picked that, and at the moment we don't want to deploy in here. So you can actually create a package from Visual Studio and then bring it in here and deploy it from within the management portal, but I wanted to actually deploy from Visual Studio because it's just cooler. So do not deploy. And that goes ahead and creates the hosted service. It takes a minute or two, maybe less, depending on how lucky we are, to get that ready. Meanwhile, we'll switch back to the application, to Visual Studio. And the first thing we want to do is right-click on the solution and add a new project. And the new project we want to add is what you get when you install the SDK, which is from the cloud templates, we get Windows Azure project. And yes, I am working in Visual Basic.
When are you moving to C#?
Okay, so we're going to call this Hello TechEd Azure and create that.
There were some good sessions on C# if you wanted to make that move. Bruce, hopefully you went to a few.
Nothing wrong with Visual Basic. Okay, so it asks us to actually select a web role. We're actually going to ignore that for now. We're going to add it from within the Solution Explorer here. So it gives us this project and a roles folder within that, and it gives us a whole bunch of files that have the necessary configuration. If we right-click on roles and add web role project in solution, it gives us a list of all the projects in the solution we can choose from. So we select that, and that associates the web role for that website, for that web application. Almost there. We've got to now do some configuration. So a couple of things. Firstly, we need to change the web.config. And because I'm already pointing to the Azure database, I don't need to change the connection string there. And I've prepared a couple of snippets here that I can copy and paste. So we need to put in our system diagnostics for the tracing to work in Azure. Now I'm going to point you to a blog that I followed for all of these steps, and it actually takes you through exactly what I'm showing you step by step, including all of the code examples that I'm using. Okay, so we've done that. We go to our global.asax. I don't know if anyone says ASAX.
Any Kiwi cousins in here?
Maybe. ASAX sounds better, I think. So application start. So we need to pop some code in there, and we also need to set up some imports. So I've again got them ready for copy and paste. And you'll be pleased to know that the blog actually is in C#, not in Visual Basic. So everyone who uses that. and stick some imports up there. So they're pointing to the Windows Azure libraries and the service runtime. Okay, and finally, we copy this bit of code in here to set the configuration up. And we're done. So 2 pieces of configuration, simply copied and pasted out of a blog, very easy. And we're ready to deploy our Hello World application. Okay, so I right-click on the project. I'd actually better go and check that it's finished preparing our service. Yep, looks good, created. Okay, so right-click on our Hello Tech Ed Azure project and choose Publish. Now, right before the Publish option, there's a Package option. If I wanted to output a file and then go and do the deployment from within the management portal, I could do that. But I choose to publish straight to Azure. And this is what I was mentioning before. You first need to point to your credentials. And this is that certificate thing that I talked about before. If you don't have one yet, you can just click on Add in here. And you go and pick a certificate for authentication from your certificate store, or create one if you don't have one. And once you do that, you go and you've got to copy and paste or you've got to browse to it in the other application, and then copy and paste your subscription ID back out, which you'll find down here on the right. You copy and paste your subscription ID back. So there's a bit of back and forth. I won't bore you with all the details, but it's fairly straightforward as well. So once you've done that once, you don't need to do that again. Select your credentials. We're going to then, once it loads, get a selection of our Windows Azure environments. Now this is where I'm going to pick whether I'm going to go to staging or to production.
QA team are going to really enjoy it if you're going straight to production.
I'm actually going to go straight to production.
You're in trouble with Julie.
That's right. Okay.
But you never create any bugs, do you, Chris?
No. Okay, so that's the one we created earlier, IX Hello Tech Ed and production, so we select that. I'm going to just stick with the defaults for everything else and hit publish. Cross our fingers and hope for the best. So pretty much what we did at this point was literally hold our breath and see what happened. It goes and builds everything, packages it up and communicates back with Azure. And then it comes up with this really cool activity log, which if you expand out, we get another favourite thing of mine, another cube to look at. It takes a few minutes. We won't sit here and watch it the whole time, but you can see the progress through the history here at uploading the files. And then when it comes back and fills this box up with all that, Azure blueness and finishes, you get the website URL under there as well. Okay, so let's just have a quick look at...
You have seen there's a stand giving away Rubik's Cubes out
in
the exhibition hall?
I have.
Okay.
If I go and have a look here at the one I've prepared earlier, I can jump into it. So this is the one I deployed to staging a while ago. So if I click on that, this is the same application running in the cloud. Hello Tech Ed 2011. Cool, looks good. So we might come back and check on our deployment progress for the production deployment in a little while. So that's still ticking away there.
That usually takes about half an hour or so to...
Oh, it depends. That one, 10 minutes maybe,
yep.
If we're lucky. Yeah, it varies. I think IntelliDocs only takes about half an hour, so the whole kind of IntelliDocs product. It's not very long, really. All right, so we'll just jump back to the slides. Okay, so you saw what we did there step by step. We actually followed Christoph Putz. He's got a blog on MSDN. And again, if you download these slides, we've got the resources page where you can grab that link. Or if you want it straight away afterwards, you can come and see me. And we literally followed the steps and thought, should be simple, we'll do the same for IntelliDocs. Now, IntelliDocs has two different web components. We've got, obviously, we've mentioned Producer and Director.
So the end user and the administrative interface.
That's right. And we figured it should be simple, do the same thing. So we actually created the Azure project in our solution and went to add the web roles just like we did there and associate them with the projects. But no. And given my awesome animation skills, you may even think I might have worked for somewhere like Pixar or something.
No.
But what we actually found was our application has progressed over the years and over many generations of .NET platform, and we actually had 2 website project types in our solution and not a single web application project type. And unfortunately, when you go to associate a web role for Azure, it has to be a web application project type. So it was kind of back to the drawing board for us, or rather back to the product development team. Thanks, Bruce. So there was a little bit of manual work there. In fact, I'd say out of the entire deployment process, that was probably the most arduous task, was just having to add in the 2 web applications and re-add all the files associated with those and re-hook up all the references and so on. But once we got it back, we got the websites converted to web application projects, and we were successfully able to associate the web applications with a web role, complete the configuration exactly as I showed you in the Hello World application, not any differently, and deploy with a bunch of ellipses there to build the suspense on whether it was actually going to work. Eureka! So it was a successful deployment, but there were still a couple of issues to fix up at that point. So we had director and producer applications working in Azure in the cloud, and that was a big high-five moment all around, which is very cool. The downside was that we have a URL reference between the 2 applications to jump from one to the other. And so the first issue was, because we moved to staging, we get this crazy, I think I pointed out, crazy GUID style number at the start that's generated when you first do your deployment. So we had URLs we couldn't predict, so we couldn't actually switch between the applications. They weren't linking together. And because of the way we structured them, our producer application was on port 80, while our director application was on a different port, 8080. So we couldn't actually do a relative reference between them.
So if you're doing things today, would you do that any differently?
Absolutely. So there are a few things we can do, and we'll just jump into that in a second. The other issue was that Designer wasn't operational at all. The click once piece that gets downloaded to the desktop. So,
and even Rocky wasn't sure whether that would work or not?
No, we were told, no, don't know. So a couple of things. Our first reaction to looking at Designer and whether click once works, our first reaction was, is this even supported in Azure? We know that there's a whole bunch of kind of OS level stuff that you don't get. And so we decided we'd drill into a little bit further. And when we did, the actual error message that we were getting was this application not found error from click once, which in click once language kind of translates to, I can't find my application manifest file. It's just not there. So we had a look back at the source and kind of figured, well, the website files are there, all the different files are there to run producer and director. There's no reason. And when we actually looked back at our source, we found that when we translated from a website to a web application project type, it didn't automatically set the correct build action against the Designer files for us. So that was an easy fix. We changed the build action. And the other issue, URL cross-referencing, you were just asking if we would have done it differently. Well, there's a couple of things we could have done differently. We can always take the GUID based URL after the first deployment and then add that to the application and redeploy it, and then it'd be fine. Or we could have restructured it so that we had the same port. We had a main domain and a couple of subdomains, so that we could have done a relative reference between the 2 applications. What we chose to do, we thought was just a bit cooler. We decided we'd just go straight to production, which gave us a fixed URL. And you can see the little cube, my favourite thing, a blue cube there filled up when we deployed to production, and next to it the website URL we got. So we're going to go ahead. You know, once we got there, I just wanted to point out we did actually have a completed base product, and that was another sort of big win for us. So I'm going to show it to you now. Thank you. All right. So IntelliDocs Azure, IntelliDocs TechEd.cloudapp.net. And you can see, again, the producer application that I mentioned before, the end user application. And we've had this up for a few days. I don't know if any of you have seen some of our little cards we sort of had laying around the place with our URL on it. And if you came into it leading up to today's session, you'd see that there's a pre-event form there, which you can go through and run. And you know, it tells you to come to our event if you want to win a PowerMonkey, and you can generate, and it generates a document. And that's very cool. So what I wanted to do is share with you both a little bit more about the product and explore the product a little bit, and also show you how you can actually enter the competition and win a PowerMonkey. So we're going to go ahead and log in.
Password was admin.
No, not so fast. Okay, so you can see I've unveiled, now that I'm logged in, I've got access to the folder I had restricted in there, which has the project we're going to use to actually allow people to enter the PowerMonkey competition. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a little bit of Director and Designer, and we're going to see how quick and easy we can add another question into that and publish that out to make it available to everybody. So if we have a quick look as it stands now, I'll just click on that and run it. We get a big welcome to IntelliDocs Azure. Got to fill out name and so forth. We said it was an easy process. And I promise I don't win the prize by filling this out. It's only, you know, non-employees.
You could build the logic of if Chris, then not.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll go through and fill all that out and generate. So that's all very, very straightforward. And what we want to do now is take that, generates a PDF letter to thank you for entering the competition. Okay, very cool. So back home now, we're going to jump over to Director, and this is one of the URL references that we mentioned before.
Do we want to add the comment piece first, or?
Yeah, we'll do that in Designer in just a sec. So this is Director, so we can see the projects in IntelliDocs here for us to manage. We can publish them to folders and set up users and permissions and so forth. We can configure content in the content library and connect to data sources and do all that cool stuff from Director. Designer is, of course, the Click Once application, so now it's actually using Click Once to pull down the local application. And
So that's coming down directly from Azure?
That's right. And it's actually talking back to Azure using web services, so it's actually connected up to the application through its web services. Now we'll open the project. So this is the TechEd PowerMonkey competition project. And this is Designer. You can see in the middle here our questions. So we've got the welcome page. We've got the welcome message at the top and all the different sections and questions, first name, last name, and if we have a look here, and the rating questions and company name and so forth. And what we want to do is actually, you know, ask for some general comments about the session. So we're going to go into our last session, session rating section here, and I'm just going to add a user prompt question. User prompt being our kind of text box data entry. Please provide a comment. So we give it some question text. Let's set text rows. We'll make a few rows there, add in plenty of space. Okay. We can change the name of our answer there, so just comment. Okay, so we've got our new question here, and that's as difficult as it gets. It's very easy. As we said, it's a drag and drop sort of interface. And now when we save that, it's pushed back up to Azure, and we can see that the changes straight away. So I'll close Designer.
Some of the other things we could have done in there is drawn data from an existing customer database, or done some complex logic on.
That's right, which will be even cooler once we've got that Azure Connect piece in there, which is coming next. Yep. Okay, so back here, what we want to do now is we want to effectively unpublish the pre-event form that we had in the public folder there, and we want to put in the actual competition form. So we just go in here and remove it from the project, from the folder. We're going to go ahead now and publish our project. So we select our PowerMonkey competition form. We can pick out what version we want to use. We can put in some help text. Fill out this form to enter the competition. Okay. And we can also choose what sort of format we want to output to. So we want to make this one a PDF.
So once you fill out the form, you'll get an email back with the PDF attached to it, and we could change that format here if we needed to.
Absolutely. Hit save. It's been saved. Okay, that's done. So let's take a quick look at it, and if you've got your laptops open, your devices, feel free to jump into this URL and have a play with it. The competition will be open for a little while yet, so you've got plenty of time to come back to it after your party. And okay, so
no drunk form filling.
No, that's right. So if I log out now, you can see just in the public folder I've got the full PowerMonkey competition form, and when I jump into there, you can see our new question down the bottom that wasn't there before. Okay, so that's IntelliDocs, that's a migration, and that's in the cloud. Just to jump over and talk about what we've got sort of planned next, so the future, not just the robot. We've got a bunch of web services and Windows services that we offer with the product in enterprise form. Things like the scheduler, so we can schedule documents to automatically generate. That's going to require getting into a worker role and so on. We haven't actually done that piece yet, but that's coming next.
Some of our customers, like New Zealand Transport Authority, use that functionality to schedule print runs of licences and infringement notices and things like that.
Yep, and Azure Connect, we've already mentioned a few times. That's another thing on the radar, and that's going to be very cool to be able to reach into those data stores across the cloud to on-premise barrier and create one of those hybrid models of security that Rocky goes on about.
Way to go.
And of course, get into the SharePoint integration with SharePoint Online. So, the product already can connect to SharePoint, but now the product's now IntelliDocs in the cloud, and how that can reach into your local instance of SharePoint and push generated documents there. And of course, get into the ADFS stuff to make authentication much smoother. So, really, what coming out of this, if you get something out of this, I think, the big message I wanted to share was, apart from our own story, was just to encourage everybody to get started, download the SDK. You've seen how easy start clouding. Go and have a play with IntelliDocs teched.cloudapp.net. That'll be available into next week, so you can have a play with it for a while yet. And after the session, if you grab one of our little cards, it'll remind you what the URL is when you forget it later at the party and so on.
I'll have some of those down the front, and if anyone wants some IntelliDocs stubby openers, which are really important giveaways.
Yeah, we've got some other giveaways. Fill out the form, enter the competition, and hopefully score yourself a PowerMonkey. And of course, come and talk to us. Go and check out our website, and if you want to find out more about IntelliDocs Azure. Any questions? We got a bit of time before the party. So.
Can you go back to the previous slide?
Yep.
Questions?
Silence was the... Ah, yeah, let's have a look. Have you finished writing down the URL? Cool. Yes? Okay, let's jump in and have a look. So if we go here, you can see, as I mentioned before, you get the filled up blue box there when it's completed and the URL. When we click on that, it should jump straight in. Sometimes it can take a few extra minutes for sort of DNS entries to catch up, so if that ever happens, you can always just use the IP address to access it directly. I haven't had that happen too often, so it's been pretty good. And it largely worked. We've got our question mark there, so obviously it wasn't authorised to access the data directly from that instance yet, but yeah.
It's another firewall entry we'd need to add in. And
Yep, we'd need to make sure the allow access from Azure option is selected.
okay.
Any other questions?
Who's going to go and try to build a Azure app after this? Very good. Okay, prizes for everyone. Rocky's got some cars to give away. Please see him after the show. Also for technical advice, he's great as well.
All right, well, if there's no questions, we may as well call it a wrap.
I think there's a couple of
we've got a
extra
couple of
slides we
mandatory
need to show you
slides.
from
Yep.
Microsoft, I think.
Thank you.
Well done, Chris.
Thanks. Okay, so there's our resources page, so I encourage you to download our slides and take a look at those if you want to get into Azure yourself. And of course, do the evaluation. You might score yourself a touch mouse. It looks pretty cool. Wouldn't mind nabbing one of those myself.
Okay, thanks.